Good morning. I'm back to you again. It's October the 12th. And I was just finishing up with what happened with the bullying and then some incidents. Then the shooting occurred. Now, my husband was, and it was, April the 6th, 1999, when that occurred. My husband was, by this time, he'd just got on short-term disability, and we had to struggle to get onto that. So the month prior to that, when the shooting had actually occurred. But the anger and hearing the shooting and knowing things, and it just got worse. He was more and more addicted to the painkillers. And then when he couldn't get the painkillers because the doctors cut him off the painkillers, then it was just worse. It was just all kinds of outbursts against me and the kids. And that's what is very hard to describe, because this was continued until there was an inquest into the shooting. And it was determined that the 4 people he shot were the bullies that were bullying him and making fun over his stuttering. And this really affected my husband. At the time, I was also volunteering in the community with the Hintonburg Community Association on their security committee, when my husband finally decided, after all his outbursts, and that could I go and get our city councilor so he could talk to her. So I brought our city councilor in to our home. So then more was revealed at that time to the city councilor, because the inquest was coming in. There was a lot of questions that needed to be answered. So he was describing the incident as I just described in the other video of the incidents with that incident with the shooter at the time. There was other incidents too where he stepped in on the bullying. For example, when he was hurt, he tried to go back originally, and they put him on parts department for the parts coming in and out for the buses. And at that time, the computers were just coming out, so he had to learn how to use the computers, because the system was terrible. They didn't know how many parts they had or anything else. Everything was upside down in the parts department. So he managed to figure out how to use the computer and put the parts together and in order, so that it was cataloged. Okay, if you had 10 of these parts, okay, well, 3 were used and they had to be replaced. But it was coming down to, at times, he couldn't figure out if he had 10 parts and all of a sudden he was down to 1 part. Where did the other ones go? And then this is what he was trying to help the shooter do as well. He tried to put him on light duties too. But the shooter was still getting bullied at that time when that happened. This was way before the shooting had occurred and before he was let go from OC Transpo, the shooter, and while my husband was working. But he'd intervened, I believe, in a number of cases, as well as these bullies that were bullying him were more or less bullied by the foreman, because this is where it was coming out. My husband was telling our city councilor at the time that what was happening with people were coming in using the parts for their cars and stuff from OC Transpo, so that's why they were disappearing. He figured it out with the computer and everything else, and where these parts were going. Of course, everybody bullied him, tried to keep his mouth shut on it. The foreman they were taking other equipment and other things out because the foreman apparently had a cottage, and they were doing repair work, instead of going to work, going to repair work for the foreman. And they were taking materials from OC Transpo as well to help put his cottage together. So this was coming out to the city councilor. And it was what he was also saying, where when they were sick, they'd have somebody watching the house to make sure that he was sick, that he wasn't doing anything. But at that point, he was in chronic pain. There was no way he could do anything. He was mad. He couldn't do anything. Our boys were trying to help him out, and he still got mad when they didn't do anything right. So this was updated there, and it was a time it was really horrible, but I was so proud of him for finally talking about what was going on in the garage, intimate details, like if they had for example, a doctor came in, they would keep their files there, and what was supposed to be personal kept in the files. These files were broken into in OC Transpo, into wherever they were being kept. So the management would have something on all the employees, which meant that they had a way of bullying people at the same time. So there was a lot more going on behind this, and of course after things got rough with us, and he of course tried to deny that he said all this, but he said it right to our city councilor. And then of course one of the employees also, he knew, came and talked to us because he was there during the shooting, and he was describing how the gunman came through and he was picking out certain people in that, and he was trying to duck the rifle, and I was seeing myself going back into my earlier experience with my first husband, the police officer, when that little 3-4-year-old girl got a hold of his police revolver, and I had his police revolver pointed at me. So I was living through a horrible experience at the same time. So it got to the point where we got through the inquest and that, and then it just went on for years. I had to quit everything. I pretty much had to stay home. I didn't want to, and if I had to work sometimes to make ends meet, I would be doing like flyers. I used to deliver the penny saver sometimes from 5:30 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night, but I'd be coming back and forth to the house to see what was going on. And then the other thing that people don't understand about the shooter was his background. And it was about 2 years after the shooting that I was sitting in Odawa, and I was in craft class learning how to do my indigenous crafts at the time. And this girl beside me nudged me, she befriended me, and then she told me that was her cousin who had done the shooting at OC Transpo, and explained where the stuttering came from. They blamed his mother, but then again his mother had gone through the residential school scenario. So again, the poor parenting here. So this ended up leading to a shooting because whatever it was making him so nervous that he was stuttering, his mother contributed to this because of whatever her experiences were in the residential schools. So this was not a good scenario, and as I learned more about the residential schools, I started understanding things a lot more. So it continued on for a while, and then it got worse. And the more pain he was in, the more angry he felt. Like this was his pent-up anger. And even when they had at this time, they had the trauma counselors, and I tried to even get him after the inquest to go and talk to one of the trauma counselors, and he wouldn't even do that. So it just kept building up inside of him. And finally it got to a point where it was getting really bad, and this is where I told you in an earlier video how I almost got strangled by my first husband, and that again was work related because he couldn't handle a suicide as a police officer when he took it. In this particular case, I was just sitting in my chair in the living room, and I was just doing my crafts. He was just sitting there, and all of a sudden he wanted to do some scrap. He liked to do a bit of scrap, and he was looking for his glasses, couldn't find his glasses. So he came on top of me and accused me of taking his glasses deliberately. Well, I didn't take his glasses deliberately. So he looks all over. He starts getting really mad at me, and then he gives me those looks, and then I'm up out of the chair and he's starting to chase me. And the next thing I know, I find myself literally running into the hallway where he grabbed me by the neck. He literally lifted me up with one hand. He literally put me in the metal coat hook behind, and he was just strangling me. And luckily for me, our daughter at the time had heard all the commotion downstairs, so she ran downstairs, yelled at him to stop. So he dropped me, but in the process punched her as well. So we got out of that, and then in the end we did find his glasses. Now, he was always in the habit, when he used to go out and drive, he used to put his baseball cap on top of the VCR at the time, on top of the TV, with his sunglasses and the baseball cap. Turned out we found his reading glasses that he was looking for, that he accused me of taking, were also, both the sunglasses and his reading glasses were in his baseball cap. I hadn't touched them at all. So this was bringing me back, and at that time I was having to relive that experience again of being strangled with my husband. And at that point I tried to explain years later to the detective at the same time, where I was looking at a picture, and I have a picture of a white buffalo, and in the background, it shows the burial, how we used to bury our dead and the indigenous people on the high pillars. And that was the last thing that I thought I was going to see before I died. And again, as I was trying to describe it to her, I was flashbacking, or I call it being caught in a time warp, to a time when my first husband was trying to strangle me. But I do have the proof of the picture. So I'm going to just get up here, and I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to see if I can just turn this around. Let's go. Okay, show you. There's the picture up there of the white buffalo. That was the last thing that I thought I was going to see before I died. So again, I'm going to redo back to me. And again, this video is getting a little bit long, so I'm going to cut it off. And this will be part 2, and then I will continue on with part 3.